Welcome to the Settlement Pros Podcast. Here's your host, Jack Meligan.
Welcome, everybody, to the Settlement Pros Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Meligan, and today's guest is trial lawyer Mark Bocci from Lake Oswego, Oregon. Welcome, Mark. I'm a 30-year veteran of the settlement planning, pre-mediation consulting, and financial advising business, and I interview the best trial lawyers and settlement experts in the country to uncover their true stories. The goal of this podcast is to help injury victims connect up with true trial attorneys for their cases. True trial attorneys, in my opinion, after 1,400 cases of my own and attending nearly 400 mediations across the country, I've met a lot of good attorneys, some bad attorneys, and a few, as the Clint Eastwood movie goes, the good, the bad, and the ugly, a few ugly. And my goal here is to help connect plaintiffs again with true trial lawyers, and true trial lawyers go into the courtroom, they try cases, win or lose, and that's what makes them so dangerous and respected by defendants. And that's how you, as a trial lawyer, get better settlements. And better settlements are what we're after for injury victims, the people that are the focus of this entire civil justice system and the personal injury settlement industry that we're involved in. So again, welcome, Mark. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jack.
So
I can't help it. I have to make a comment on what you just said.
Oh, hit me
already. I mediate a lot, have for about 12 or 14 years in addition to my trial practice. And people would be surprised about the attitude in the defense room about who the plaintiff's lawyer is. There is a direct correlation between what is paid to resolve a case based upon the evaluation of the plaintiff's trial lawyer, whether they will try the case, whether they will fund the case, and whether they will try the case competently. And it has very much to do with driving the settlement value of any good personal injury case.
Yes, very definitely agree with that. So you've had, I think you told me, about 40 years experience as a trial lawyer and a good 12 or so as a mediator. I know you've been in high
like
demand.
100.
What's that?
Seems like 100.
I want to talk to you about that too. What causes it to feel like 100 years? You practice out of Lake Oswego, Oregon, which is a suburb about 5 miles south of downtown Portland. You've had a unique perspective, I'm sure, from not only the plaintiff attorney side of the table, but also as a mediator. And I know we're going to get into some deeper discussion about that later. But I want to get some background on you. And as long as I've known you, and as many cases that we worked on together, and that's a disclosure I'll make to the listening audience. This is an attorney that I've known for probably 25 of my 30 years doing what I'm doing, and someone that I've seen in action. And
if I can interrupt again, Jack, I have happily employed you on innumerable cases over the years, over the decades, and you've been a tremendous help to my clients. I don't do a major case without your involvement.
Well, thank you for that confidence. That's been great. So, Mark, let's talk about you a little bit. As much as we've been around each other and worked on cases, I don't know that I know the whole story, and that's going to be a good place, I think, to start. So were you born in Portland?
I'm a Portland native, I am.
And how many kids in your family?
We had 8 kids, 9, lost one to a crib death, but I've got 7 siblings. One's a lawyer, one's a fisherman, one's a chef. We got all kinds of people.
Bocci, that's obviously Italian, huh?
It is. Grew up in the grocery business.
So tell me about that. That was your dad's your family's business?
My
Mom too?
dad was in the grocery business. We all started working there when we were young. I probably started about age 8, and I think that's the last time I didn't have a job.
So, did everybody work in the business? All kids?
Almost all. The last 2 of the 8 were about 10 years behind the 6th one, and by the time that happened, Dad was out of the business. So the first 6, the primary family did.
So was it Bocci Grocery?
No, it was the Market Basket, and it was a modest size store. It's not like a big Albertsons or Safeway, but much bigger than a little specialty shop. It was, meat, lots of meat, produce, dairy, about 6-8 grocery aisles. Good sized store.
Was that a chain or was that your dad's sole?
Yeah, he had 1 to 2 stores at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Grocery business.
It was initially Paul's Food Lane was the first one.
Okay. Very cool. So you went to grade school, high school in the Portland area then?
I did. Grade school and then high school at Jesuit. Jesuit priests were a great influence on me. Went down to University of Oregon for undergrad and did night school at Lewis and Clark at Northwestern School of Law in Portland.
Wow.
Best part of that was I went at night and I clerked for a great judge for 3 of my 4 years. So I was in the courtroom for 3 years before getting my law degree. So I was hooked.
Outstanding. So growing up, big family, Catholic family.
Yep, you bet.
Yep. What were you like in grade school? Did you go to a Catholic grade school too, or
I did,
public?
Holy Family grade school. It was a great experience for me. 8th grade president, that kind of stuff. It was an environment that fit for me. We were all buddies. It was a great experience. Good time.
So you grew up then in which decade?
I'm not grown up yet. Does that matter? Well, I was born in late 49. So, when I'm 10 years old, it's 1960.
Yeah, the wonder years.
Yeah.
Very cool. That must have been very, very fun. I was right behind you, but the early 60s were really good too. But the wonder years there in the 50s, pretty neat stuff. So Little League,
felt a little bit like we grew up in American graffiti. We were very fortunate. Life was simpler.
So
challenges were great, but life was simpler.
Yeah, life's simple. So did you play any Little League sports or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did baseball and all that. By the time I got to high school, I wasn't athletic enough or good enough to do much but run. So ran distances, 2-mile, cross country, that kind of stuff. Was not good enough for college.
A greyhound.
Yeah. Of sorts.
So did you guys have any hardships growing up?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, the independent grocer is a really tough business. It was the one thing my dad made each of us promise we wouldn't do, is what he did. He just saw the writing on the wall, and the big operations were going to sell most of the groceries. And so it was a little bit of a hard scrabble existence. Dad was a kind and blessed heart. And the store was in a neighborhood where there were some hungry people, and Dad gave away a lot of food. I think that when you look back at his life, there are those who would fault him for too much generosity, but I never saw it that way. I believed his epitaph should be that he took care of people who needed to be taken care of.
Yeah. Fed the masses. Like another famous guy in history.
Yeah, there you are.
So, how old were you when your sibling passed?
I was high school. I was like a junior in high school or so. We lost Christine at 3 months.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was tough at the time.
Yeah.
Real tough on my mom.
Yeah, I'll bet. So, who were your friends growing up? Anybody that you're still in touch with today?
You know, interestingly, maybe we just lack imagination out here in Oregon, but I see, but three of my three best friends from grade school, I still see regularly. We have a group of about 20 of us from high school, 20 guys. We were an all-guy high school. Sometimes 25 of us. We show up once summer on my deck and reminisce and tell stories. I don't know anybody else that does that with as big and close a group as we have. And many of them, a dozen of them are close, regular, personal, all the time friends. So very blessed by that. And then a similar group from college. So pretty blessed. It speaks to staying, living where you grew up.
Yeah. Well, I'm jealous of that, as I'm on the other end of the spectrum, and we moved quite a bit when I was growing up. So I always kind of wondered what it would have been like if I'd have been in the same spot forever and ever. But I don't regret it, because looking back, all that chain of events and those moves brought me to where I am today, and that's a really good spot. So
Helps
I'm happy
to form
about
who
it.
we are, for sure.
Yeah, we are who we are, and
Yep.
not much we can do about it, but adapt. So, you said you went to Oregon University. What was that like for you?
Those were the halcyon years. We were in the Vietnam War. There was a lot of dissent. I was draft eligible. Actually, college was great for me. I loved Eugene. I loved being a doc. I loved the whole experience. Got a degree in poli-science in 4 years, which you can do absolutely nothing with. I was fortunate in that my start of my sophomore year, I went to a local Safeway store, applied for a job. Manager had a stack of applications an inch thick. When he asked me what I knew how to do, I said everything, because I'd grown up in the business, everything but cut meat. And he said, nobody in this stack knows how to bag groceries. Gave me a job, and I worked there part-time for 3 years, put myself through school, came out with no debt. It was great.
Wow.
My folks had all the other kids at home and could kind of not worry about me. So that worked out well.
So what led up to your decision to go to Oregon over anywhere else?
Money. I'd applied, didn't get into Notre Dame, applied to Boston College, a few other places, Georgetown, got accepted, but I needed money to go. Our family didn't have that kind of cash. And ultimately, I came to the realization that I really wanted to live in the Northwest, and that it made sense to go to school in the Northwest, which is why for law school, I just came back up the freeway to Portland. So I'm blessed in that my relationships with friends from grade school, high school, college, law school are all still here. Those of us that are still around.
Yeah, that's great. That's
And
great.
then as you asked about the college years, Vietnam draft, I came up number 3 in the lottery. And
Which year?
so my senior year, I was either going to go to Vietnam, or I was going to marry Sherry and go to law school. And it was, talk about crossroads in your life. That was one.
Yeah, I'll bet. So that would have been what year? 67?
72.
72.
Yeah.
72 when you graduated from Oregon?
Yep.
So you married your was she your college sweetheart, Sherry?
Well, met her the first week there.
Wow.
Like I said, I lack imagination.
Some guys just live a charm life.
Well, you knew Cher. That was the best choice you could make.
Yeah. Well, you locked down early, but
Yeah.
it's because you were locking down at the top.
Locked down and held on tight, dude.
That's right. Oh, thank God for these gals that we married that took us on and made
Helped
us.
form us.
Helped form us. So, how many kids?
2 daughters.
I know that.
40 and 39. You knew that. Cher, as you know, passed away from cancer about 8 years ago.
Yes.
One daughter, Shayna, has a couple kids living in Boulder, so I got grandkids there. And my eldest, Chelsea, has a 7-month-old daughter, and they are living with me.
How did that happen?
It is the happiest and best thing that ever could happen in life.
So, how old is the granddaughter?
7 months this Friday.
Wow. So, October. So that takes us back to March.
Yeah, April. Yeah.
So,
Pandemic
our oldest daughter
baby.
had a COVID baby on. She had to deliver by C-section on April 11th.
Yep, we're within a week. We're 7 days apart for our little girls.
That's right. So we got a little boy, Aaron, and
That's right.
we're jealous because mom and dad have been very careful about quarantining and protecting the little guy until he, could really get up and running. And so we've seen him 3 times from about, 12 feet or so away.
That's really hard, Jack.
Door.
That is so hard.
It would have been really nice if they were living with us.
I got the opposite side because we don't have many people in to see him. So I get way more time with him than you would normally because the rest of the family can't get at him. I mean, at her, excuse me.
Yeah, you're so lucky. Lucky. This is so interesting. Just for the people who are listening, we're recording this podcast on October 21st. So for perspective, but you may have figured out based on the number of months that Mark said it's been since granddaughter was born that we might be in about October. So it's been strange times, and we're looking forward to the possibility that at Thanksgiving we may actually see that kid for the first time and get to hold him.
Pray that happens for you, Jack.
Yeah, we're missing that. We're missing that part of it.
You and Kathleen, having had grandkids, you know what it's like, and
it's the best.
As good as life gets for us now.
It's the best. So you made a decision. You decided to go to law school instead of architecture school or medical school or maybe some other school. Maybe those are the only 3 choices for extending your education, huh?
Well, I had to do something besides. It was either grocery store or political science career, and those didn't make a lot of sense.
So when you went into law school, did you have any idea that you might gravitate into personal injury trial work?
I had a bug about the courtroom. I just had a bug about the courtroom. I always thought that'd be the direction I went. And,
really?
Yeah. I mean, not always, but from the time I decided to go to law school, there was no question. So I sought out the job clerking, sitting in a courtroom every day, watching the good, the bad, and the ugly take place, learning how good lawyers tried cases, what ethics meant. I had a terrific tutor as a judge that would tell me ahead of time what to watch from the lawyers in the case and educate me about them. And probably 90% of what I have used in my practice, I got from my job instead of law school back then.
Wow. So from your 3 years in law school, and it sounds like you were working during the day because you'd gotten married, and so you're going at night and studying. And Man, that's a tough road.
You know, we were 22 to 26 years old,
Yeah.
as in love as you could be. Cher was teaching. Uh, it was a tough road. I didn't like law school. It was a chore for me. I did good at it, but I didn't like it. I wanted to get on with it, but it's the price you pay.
So did you meet any interesting professors? Any attorneys come in from the practices around Portland or anywhere in Oregon to lecture?
Yeah, we were pretty. My favorite was Ed Brunette, who passed away here a year or two ago. He was the toughest professor I had in law school, but my favorite. It's funny how that works out. It was his first year teaching, so we were rubes together, and we remained friends for a
What
long
did you have him
time.
for?
I'm sorry, for civil pro,
Okay.
civil procedure, which
Yeah.
was as uninteresting as a topic can be. And then we benefited. We had 4 nights of law school, or 4 years of night school. A lot of the lawyers practicing in Portland and in Oregon were night school lawyers. That was the main school back for the generation or two before me. And so a lot of them in the Portland area. So we had real world trial lawyers coming up and either teaching classes or speaking to us with some regularity. So we actually got some real world training that you don't typically get back then, you did not typically get in law school.
Sounds like it. So were there any cases going on around that time while you were going through law school or clerking that maybe on the national scene or the state scene, that something that was big that you remember that influenced you or made an impression?
Yeah, I mean, there was one case that my Judge Olson sat for. It was a birth control pill, a stroke injury, very on in the birth control litigation when it was being widely used and there wasn't much known about the side effects. And so it was an early case, and that was very interesting. There's always been interesting stuff going on in the law. There's always interesting cases going on.
So what was the result in that case?
It was actually a defense verdict, which surprised me at the time.
And why did it surprise you?
Oh, obviously I sat in the courtroom for 5 weeks watching it and saw all the evidence. And, I think it failed because not enough was known. And so the plaintiff's theories and experts were compared to the rest of the industry a little bit over their ski tips. Turned out they were right in hindsight about the problems with the pill back then, but they were very early in the cycle.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a great job. I mean, it was just, you couldn't have had a better job in law school. And also, I feel so bad for these young people today. They're coming out of school with $300,000 or $400,000 in debt. I was able to work during the day, share taught school. We came out of both college and law school paying my own way and no debt, which allowed me to become a plaintiff's lawyer because I didn't need to go have a paycheck right away to pay big loans.
Yeah.
And it's a problem getting good. I mean, you want the best people to go represent individuals. And it's a real problem when they are saddled with too much debt coming out of school so that they can't make that choice. I didn't make much money for about 10 years that it took me to learn my trade and to try cases and to lose them, to win them, to get bigger cases, higher responsibility. We didn't have advertising back then, which was better, frankly. It was a better world in that respect. Not everybody would agree with that, but I believe it.
Well, to the point of the podcast, sort of. I mean, I'm trying to shine a light on and feature real, honest to God, true trial lawyers lawyers who try cases. And that's what makes them a settlement pro, because they've got the respect of the other side. But um, when well, I started to lose my point, but
Can I jump in with something, Jack?
yeah,
Well, one of the flaws in our system, people should have choice who they hire, and they should have information about that. That one of the difficulties I see in mediations, and I've known for decades, is that different lawyers, because of what they have done, have earned more respect and instilled more fear in the other side. And that's true of both plaintiff and defense.
Sure.
Sometimes, and often sometimes, the value of an injury for one person versus another, if it's the same injury, which it never is, but let's say very similar injury, has a different value depending on whose door that person knocked on to represent them. And I consider that one of the flaws in our system. It's much better than a calibrated workers' comp type system. That's a terribly unfair system, but we do have a weakness in that, the other side pays on a risk-reward basis, and risk-reward evaluation factors in whether they're worried about the person representing the plaintiff.
Yeah, and I want to get into that particular point with you a little deeper in just a little while. But what I was going to say is that prior to the internet, it was really reputation. It was referrals. Mm-hmm. And that system, I agree with you. It seemed like it was a lot better, because if someone was out and asking, hey, who do I need to talk to? Who's the best? I think that system maybe worked a little better in helping consumers find the better attorneys. What I see today, and when I talk to plaintiffs about how they found the particular attorney that is handling their case, and this is usually, this conversation's happening when I've been invited to the mediation, for instance, and then I'm, as there's long periods of time where the mediation kind of is quiet and there's not a lot happening while mediator's in the other room, and I'll have a chance to ask the clients, hey, how did you come about retaining this attorney? And it's been surprising to me to find out that that a lot of people go online and they use Google and they call the first or second attorney that pops up in their search. And when I've done that in certain areas and looked around, I've seen that a lot of times we've got attorneys that are advertising, and they've got really good web people, and their search engine optimization is really good. So they're coming up high in the results. But when you look at their track record, some of these firms are bragging about the fact that they settle all their cases, and they settle them fast to get the client's money to them quick. And I'm sure that resonates with some people. But for the good of the listening and viewing audience, what I want to say about that is, inside of this business, guys like Mark know, and I know that's actually a firm that is probably settling cases for a fraction of their value. And if they don't go in the courtroom, that's part of the problem. They're just not going to get those kind of good numbers.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of mills. There are firms that advertise even nationally that never try a case, and they hold themselves out as experts in the cases. Much of it, advertising, solicitation, the internet, what I'll call inflated claims of their prowess. They scoop up most of the cases. It used to be referrals from defense lawyers, from your old clients. Everybody knew who the best were, and the moderate sized cases made their way to the right people, and the really high responsibility cases did. And it doesn't happen as much now. Those big operations are running by the numbers. get a whole bunch of files in, get them turn them as quick as you can. You don't achieve your best result for your clients doing that. And it's unfortunate that has been the result of the allowance of advertising, frankly, and solicitation.
Yeah, I agree. So when you came, well, before we move on from your first job as a clerk, what exactly does a clerk do for a judge? I mean, everything? Do you just
It's
grab
the
files?
greatest job ever if you're
So
in law school.
describe what a clerk does. And
You
those
get-
must be pretty highly coveted jobs, right?
Oh, if you want to be in a trial work, they are the best jobs. You get the file for your judge the day before. That's usually when the assignment's made. You go get it. You give it a quick read. You get it to your judge as soon as he comes in. He gets it the day before, usually about midday. So you become aware of what it is. You run the courtroom. You swear witnesses. Control the back, get witnesses out of the hall. You do legal research for your judge. You're intimately involved in the whole process. You watch openings, closings, cross-examinations, experts of every ilk, cases of every ilk. You just are a jack of all trades, master of none.
Wow. But involved in the entire process from one end of the courtroom to the other.
If you're not one of the lawyers, it's about as involved as you can be in the trial of a case.
Interesting. Did he try any criminal cases?
Yeah, we ran a general field, so you'd get criminal. We didn't get much domestic relations, stuff like that, but occasionally you would. You get criminal, civil, rape cases. He did some murder cases. He was a very, very well-respected civil justice attorney. And so he got sent big, complex civil cases because of his experience.
Interesting.
Made it more interesting.
Yeah. So
and those cases back then were getting the best lawyers on them. So you got to see the best lawyers come do it.
wow, that must have been really something.
Those were the days.
Yeah. So you worked for the judge for how long?
4 years, or 3 years, 3 of my 4.
Wow, that was a pretty good extensive apprenticeship in essence then.
Yeah, it really is the best. If you're interested in trial work and you can land that kind of opportunity, it's a big deal.
Wow. Okay. So so you get out of law school and you've had that experience in the courtroom with the judge as a clerk.
Yeah.
So what did you do next? What was your first move out of law school?
This, in hindsight, it was so simple. The last year and a half, we were in presiding court, so I knew every trial lawyer in town. I mean, and
Yeah.
you're the presiding judge's clerk. Everybody wants to be your friend because you're access. You
Sure.
want to get in to see the judge. Who do you call? You call his clerk. Say, hey, Mark, I need to see Judge Olson. Okay. Everybody's best friend. So I actually had a lot of opportunity on both sides of the bar. There were some very, very good, very well-known defense firms I could have gone to work for. But I'd been in the courtroom and there was no way I was not going to represent injured people. So I was only thinking the plaintiff side. My brother-in-law, about 4 years older, is a very, very, very well, Jim Pippin, a very
Yes.
well-respected, terrific trial lawyer. And I passed up the firms and went and hung up my hat with Pip.
Right from the beginning.
Right from the get-go.
Wow. So he's told me about some of his experience before you guys got together. And I think he was with the Burl Green firm
It was
right
Earl and
before.
Jim. Yeah.
So then he left that firm and
To
basically
open
said to
his
you,
own
hey, let's
shop,
team
and
up.
he let
Huh?
to open his own shop, and I joined him 6 months later.
Wow. So first case.
Okay, first case that's a good story.
I want to hear it.
It's probably sometime a year or two in, and you're looking to try anything. You're looking to get your hands on a good case. So I'm a couple of years in, maybe. Lawyer over in Central Oregon calls Pip up and says, "Hey, I got this case. It's for this cowboy who got arrested for cattle rustling. We're suing the state for arresting him. Gene Hallman's got the other cowboy. I've been riding Gene's coattails, and I thought his case was going to go first, but the judge just sent us both to trial together. Case is in a week. Will you go try it will you take it over for me?" And Jim had too much experience to want to do that. He said, "Hell no, but shit, Botch will try anything right now." So I jumped in my Volkswagen van, drove over to Central Oregon, met Gene Hallman the night before. To this day, one of my best friends in the law and one of the smartest guys in the bar.
Yeah.
And we tried a week-long case for a couple of cattle rustlers against the state of Oregon for arresting them, alleged cattle rustlers. And I remember we're trying it in Fossil, Oregon, middle of the summer, upstairs courtroom, no air conditioning. It was like To Kill a Mockingbird with the old rickety fan going on up above. The judges let us take off our coats. It's about 95 degrees in there.
Wow.
And I remember as I'm arguing to the jury, drips of sweat are falling off my nose with regularity, and I just gave up and let them. But during the cross-examination of the guy who prosecuted him, I got him to admit that they knew all along that these guys were not the rustlers. They were trying to get at the guy's boss. These guys were innocent. And so our argument was there's nothing more valuable to a cowboy in Central Oregon, Eastern Oregon, than his reputation. And the jury returned us each exactly one half of our prayer and told us afterward that the reason they did that is that they know the lawyers always ask for twice as much as they want. And one more great part to that story, didn't have enough jurors. So talk about a court clerk job. The judge sent the clerk out down the street, middle of the morning, middle of the day, to go round up some more folk to sit on the jury. So he went down to the cafe and the bar and pulled half a dozen or 8 more people in to fill out the jury pool. It was tremendous.
So there was no voir dire then. You just took them.
No, there was. We
okay.
got voir dire them. We'd run out of them though. There weren't enough. You can't make that stuff up anymore.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, Fossil, Oregon. I went hunting out of there about 30 years ago, and it was still a small little town with a couple of the main attraction was a couple of bars, as I remember, and a grocery store.
That's
and then
the courthouse still sits there right in the middle of town.
Yeah, man, what a deal. So, all right, interesting first case. So then what was the well, let's talk about some of your plaintiff representation in the personal injury space. I know you've had some amazing trials, and the one that I heard about first was the case that you won against Bike Helmet.
Yeah, Bike Helmet was a case that Jim and Pip and I tried together. The first one before the first 7-figure case was $1 million verdict for the death of a woman. That was a very interesting case and kind of put me on the radar. And then after that happens, you start getting better opportunities.
Yeah. So what year was that you got the $1 million verdict?
Gosh, I can't remember, but $1 million verdicts were very rare back then. So it tells you how old I am.
Yeah. Would it have been late 70s or early 80s?
I got out in 76, so it would have been early 80s probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember. I mean, I started in my niche of working with trial lawyers and personal injury plaintiffs in late '85, and I remember $1 million verdict or $1 million settlement was a big deal.
Yeah, it was ground shaking.
Big deal.
Yeah,
And
and
now today with
it was a tough case, and and I did it myself, and it was she had left behind a husband and a small child who was in the back of the car for the accident.
and so this was a motor vehicle accident.
It was. She ran into the back of a stalled vehicle on the freeway early in the morning, and the reason, the genesis of the case was why had the car stalled. So I sued Ford Motor Company, whose brand new vehicle it was, and Convoy Company, who was transporting it that morning, and actually achieved a verdict for $1 million that was a 50-50 split between the two defendants with no fault on my lady.
Wow. So what what did you uncover about that brand new vehicle that caused it to stall like that?
That's too long a story for
All
here. But we determined why it had occurred. It had really occurred at Convoy Company.
Interesting.
So, and I'll tell you though, Ford was the target defendant. They just looked big to the jury. Defense lawyer in that case for Ford, Dick Bodyfelt, did one of the best things I've ever seen in the courtroom. Closing argument, last day of trial. I make my argument and then we break for lunch. And he's up right after lunch. He walks back into the courtroom, and he'd figured out then where he thought the jury was going. So he's trying to make sure that Convoy Company gets their part of this. And he walked in and he said, I listened to Mr. Bocci this morning. This took such courage on his part. And I listened to him talk about what the plaintiff, Mr. Johnson, does when he calls home. Nobody answers anymore. There's nobody to answer the phone when he calls his home. And I went at lunch and I called my wife and I talked to her and I realized that I had somebody there to answer, and I tried to understand the depth of that loss. And boom, boom, boom. He came and he took the courtroom in the most skillful way possible, took a verdict that was going to come back against him, was such a good human and a solid person that he put half of that verdict in the other defendant's pocket. And he just sat there and he looked at me and he said, he's going to get to stand up here again, and he may make fun of me for this. He's not making any notes. I don't know if that's good or bad. And I'm sitting there in the crosshairs thinking, what do I do with this? It was the damnedest thing. I mean, it was one of the bravest things I've ever seen a trial lawyer do.
Wow.
He handled it perfectly though, and he put $500,000 of it off on the other defendant.
I got to work with Dick one time, and I think at the time he was mentoring another one of your younger peers. I think he had Chuck Paulson's daughter.
Yeah, Jane.
In the firm, and I think because of that they had a plaintiff's case, so I got to work with him. Very nice guy,
Terrific guy.
Yeah, terrific guy. So
anyway, you mentioned the bike case.
Yeah,
that was interesting for a number of reasons. This was a defective football helmet, and we had a young man who was a junior in high school, backup linebacker, take a blow to the front of his helmet from an all-state running back. And to make a long story as short as I can, he had a next door neighbor who was a doctor who missed his symptoms. He had a subdural bleed from it. And we ended up in a lawsuit with Bike for a defective helmet and the doctor for not diagnosing it timely and perhaps minimizing the injuries. He's been terribly injured since. Jim and I still see him to this day, and it's been 30 years or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wasn't it 90, 91, 92, right in there?
Something like that. And it's, anyway, it was a fascinating litigation. They'd never paid.
Had they ever been tagged? Had Bike ever had to pay in a?
They'd never paid more than $600,000 in any kind of suit in America.
And does that include verdicts?
Yes.
Wow.
So they'd never been hit. And we spent, this was, there's just the two of us. We're trying to handle our practice and do this case. And this case took up half our time for 3 years, at least 3 years. We were into it about $300,000 back then, which was a ton of money.
That's enormous.
It was an enormous amount of money, but it was the only way to do it. And we were about 2 years into it before we found the key. And the key was that a rival helmet manufacturer had challenged the drop tests that they held back at Wayne State in Detroit, where they do this drop test of these helmets on this form machine and measure the impact. And the opponent, who had been out testing other helmets to see what complied and what didn't, called them to task. And so the two companies' representatives went back there with Hodgson, the guy doing the testing, and by God, they failed. And what they found out was a size 7 head with a 1-inch front sizer compressed the front sizer already, so it didn't have the ability to attenuate the blow. So the blow transmitted straight through to Richard's head, gave him the subdural and grievously injured him. So
wow,
it took us several years to find the representative of that, to find out that this had happened. The records had been destroyed. They're the only records missing out of all of the stuff back at this, at Noxie, where they measured this stuff. And miraculously, we just dug and dug and dug. We found it. We blew them up with it. And we got well, at the time, it was maybe certainly the biggest verdict in the state at about 10 million plus, $10.2 million, or $11.2 million. And when the biggest verdict before that in Oregon was $3 million.
Yeah, it was
and then
monster.
They tried to settle it on appeal. We didn't. We knew we were right. And we collected $13 million for Richard, and the money is still taking care of it.
Yeah. So how long did the appeal process take on that case?
Couple years, about 2 years back then, to go Court of Appeals and then Supreme Court.
So then from beginning to end, how long?
And my buddy Gene Hallman handled that appeal.
Yeah.
All the way back to the fossil case.
Yeah. From the cattle rustler case.
Yeah, there you go.
So from the time that you took on Richard's case to the time you collected, how many years was that from beginning to end?
It was about 5.
Wow.
And the interesting part of that, and I'll just tell you this because it says so much about Sherry and my kids. We had built our dream house. So I'd been practicing long enough to have achieved a modicum of success. And we built our dream house, and we just had this beautiful floor for the girls, and it was pretty cool. And we got a few years into this, and Jim and I were spending all our time on this case and other cases. We weren't taking other stuff on. We weren't getting cases closed. I had a $50,000 bank line that the bank called. They lost patience with me. And so I put it to Cher what she wanted to do. And And we put it to our kids, and we sold our house to fund the case, to get the bank off our back, and to fund my part of the case. Jim was, obviously in the same stretch and struggling to fund his part of it as well. And when we put it to my two daughters, who were just kids then, and that we were talking about selling the house, and what did they think of that? And they both said, for Richard, absolutely. So these
Wow.
little girls made this decision to help this terribly disabled young man they had met and sell this dream home they were in. And Katie barred the doors. It
Put it all
changed
on
the
the line.
world, and it was very formative for my kids.
Yeah, what an amazing discussion to include your kids in. Wow, what a result. So, man, I know that at the time when that hit, that was, well, it raised the bar by about triple in terms of highest verdicts in Oregon, and it definitely raised had to have raised the visibility of you and your partner, Jim Pippin. So what ended up happening after that? What was it like in terms of your case flow? And
yeah, it's just what you said, Jack. You have the opportunity to be more selective. You look at cases you might have taken once upon a time, and you make an honest appraisal that there's another lawyer who will pay more attention to it and do a better job with it. You take fewer, bigger cases, and it resulted in other 8-figure verdicts. So you get more opportunity, and with it comes more responsibility.
Yeah.
I liken it when I describe it, Jack, and I'm very serious about this. I've had about an orange size ball of I guess I'll call it some level of stress in the middle of my chest for the last 30 years since the cases got bigger. And you always carry it. You live with your losses are terrible, because the only thing you're trying to do is take care of this family, this extended family in these cases whose life has been shattered in a moment. All of the cases start with a phone call. Mr. So-and-so, this is Officer so-and-so. Things like, or the doctor, I need to talk to you about your wife's surgery. There's those moments when a family's entire existence shatters, and you spend your years with them trying to hold them together and put them together. And you can't undo what's been done, but what you can do is try and give them the financial wherewithal to take care of their injured family member, so that they can then expend their energy and their affection and love to him instead of changing his diapers and taking care of him otherwise.
Right.
So you just got to do the right thing for the right reason.
It's it is singularly the most psychically rewarding job that I personally think I could have ever had the luck to discover and sort of stumble into.
Well, that is what you do too, is when we get the money, we rely on you to make sure that it takes care of these people, and that it doesn't get wasted or frittered.
The trial lawyer, the trial lawyer though is the one doing the heavy lifting. I mean, you guys are in these cases usually a lot longer, and you live with them a lot longer. And I really relate to what you say about trying to help put these people together. When I'm out talking and lecturing and telling people about this particular niche that I found myself in, I talk to in terms and say, these people that we run into in terms of these cases that we encounter and take on as clients have encountered the worst hand of cards. Almost, there's two hands of cards. I mean, some of our cases are wrongful death cases. That's probably the absolute worst. And then we have these cases involving catastrophic personal injuries. And it's the worst hand of cards you could be dealt as a family. And it wrecks things on so many different levels. And what we're endeavoring to do, yes, is to try to make it as good as it can possibly be going forward. And in that quest, we're both on the same side of it because we're influencing really the financial side. You guys are getting the recovery and we're helping to stretch it and make it last as long as these people do. But coming into these cases when we do, as the settlement planners, it's especially rewarding because you get to participate in the actual arrangement of the financial pieces of this. And it's really rewarding to see the look on some of these clients' faces when they understand that just how life-changing this settlement's going to be, and that it's going to pay off their house, put their kids through school, and take care of them the rest of their lives.
And Jack, when you're coming into it there, and again, you've been in every major case we've handled for the last 30 years. When you come into it, that family has usually been at least several years of economic and emotional turmoil and ruin. And they don't know until the verdict how the case is going to come out, or until a proper settlement's achieved. So they've gone through the most difficult time that anyone can imagine, and you get to be there to help stitch the fabric of that family back together as best it can be done.
Yeah, it is really rewarding. I've told people that many times I've sat in a mediation talking to a husband and a wife and found out that their house is in foreclosure. The car is broken down. One guy said it's on blocks in the driveway. We got a relative to give us a ride to the mediation today, or we were going to take the bus. And literally, that plaintiff's and that claimant, that client's life is in your hands. That's the trial lawyer. I mean, you've got their entire destiny, and it is an awesome responsibility. And
thus the ball of stress.
Yes. Oh man, because, and it's, I mean, there's, the clients, I know the clients come to the mediation and many times they're thinking, oh, I hope we settle this case today because I don't know where we're going to get the money to, even get groceries. I mean, they're in dire straits because you go through an issue or an incident or an accident and you find out just how thin, how thin the thread is to life, and how close a lot of us are to financial problems. If all of a sudden we were in the hospital, incomes fell off, jobs maybe you got hurt off the job, didn't have workers' comp. It is a tough situation. But that's when I found out about this niche on my end of it. This isn't an interview about me. It's just a general discussion. But I got very excited about the idea that I was already in financial services and worked for an investment advisory here in town, and we were at the forefront of financial planning. And I just thought, wow, you mean there's a whole niche out there of working with injury victims, and they don't have anybody. They're not represented. Most of them have never had any advisors, and now they're going to have a potential settlement, and they need help in figuring out what to do with it so that it'll last as long as they will. I just got very excited about that, and the fact that I didn't make it to law school. That was my goal. Although I was, mixed up in the head, I thought maybe I'd be really interested in tax or constitutional law. But after seeing you guys in motion and seeing the, personal injury trial work and having testified in some cases, man, I I would have hoped that if I made it to law school, I'd have been diverted, because I think trial lawyers have got the best. I know there's a lot of stress and you carry a lot of responsibility, but there's also, when you think of lawyers, I mean, we don't think about people who are, working in an office and never seeing a courtroom. It's always, when they're depicted in films and media, they're going into trial. And I think it's amazing revelation to a lot of people that there aren't very many trial lawyers in the country. You got a
Jack,
million
I
four.
think there's less than 3% of lawyers are
Yeah. I mean,
trial
I think the
lawyers.
last time I looked, there was over 1,400,000 lawyers in the United States. And yeah, it was something, around, well, when you counted plaintiff and defense and criminal and you put it all together, around 3% of that number, 40, 50,000 or so were trial lawyers, true, honest to God trial lawyers. So
Yeah, I think it's a bunch of people who have self-inflicted wounds upon themselves. But, in fairness, as you know, it can be the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And we live and die by our clients' lives and their recoveries. And just like a mother can be no happier than her unhappiest child, we're never any better than our most deserving but less rewarded client.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that those times when you haven't been able to get a decision in the courtroom that benefited your client, it's got to be about the lowest feeling.
There's
to
nothing
lose.
worse.
Yep. It's got to be the worst.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about one more case, and then I want to go down a different path of questioning with you. But one of the cases I remember that I thought was just fascinating in terms of the work and the discovery that you guys did was the case.
Yeah.
And, that one was really interesting also to me, because there had been so much media coverage. We had seen her, we'd heard about this accident, made the news, and it was a famous case. So, but I was really intrigued because you guys, told me some of the backstory on how you put the pieces together to get the right parties. So tell the story a little bit about that, and what happened there.
I'll make it as direct as I can. It's a simpler story. Our client is sitting in the middle of a Toyota pickup front seat with her mom on her right. She's in the middle, and her nephew, who's about 19 years old, is driving. They're all belted in. A truck leaves a construction site. It's got a trailer in the back. The trailer in the back has left the site with a big piece of concrete wedged in its back tire. And this guy decides, of course, he denies that he knows it's there, but that's not true. He decides to just break it down and throw it. And unfortunately, it throws it forward, and by some truly terrible twist of fate, it goes through the windshield and strikes our client in the head. The little girl, she was 8 years old at the time, suffered a very serious injury. I've also seen her in the last couple of years. It's wonderful that all that has occurred for her because of the recovery.
Yeah.
So
there was a twist in that case, though, that had to do with.
Here's the most interesting twist.
Yeah.
So the trucker keeps going. Somebody driving another car that sees it turns and tracks him down and chases him, finds him stopped it gets to him at a stoplight right before he gets on the freeway to get out of there, and yells up at him, "Hey, you threw a rock back there, you caused an accident." And the guy says, "Oh, okay, I'll turn around," and promptly takes off and is never seen again. So we're able to finally identify the trucker, the company, the guy, the whole thing. The case goes on, and we're asking for the truck driver's deposition, of course. And we're not getting it. We're not getting it. We're not getting it. And finally, we just say to the defense, well, if you can't find him, you obviously don't care if we do you? And they can't say anything to that. So within 24 hours, our investigator has found him in Folsom Prison, doing time for carrying pornography across state lines.
Oh my.
So that's the guy driving the truck. So the way we played that was we get into a mediation with a very, very distinguished, wonderful retired judge, Sid Broccoli, a wonderful guy.
Yes.
And we had walked out of the first mediation. I don't know that I'm allowed to say the numbers. I can't remember if this is gagged, so I'm not going to say the numbers, but it was a 7-figure number, a mid 7-figure type number. We walk out of it with actually Al Bannon was our mediator in that one, and that didn't settle. And so the case goes on. We've discovered this, but we haven't told the defense that we've discovered it, right? So we know where he is. We don't know if they know where he is or not. I'm not going to cast that aspersion. I don't know. So we get into the mediation with Sid at the next go around, and they want to try it again. And what we do is Jim and I do a good cop, bad cop. And we're sitting there with our client, the mom, and I'm the bad cop. And I say to Sid, by the way, this is toward the end of the day, and they haven't moved off that prior number, but maybe another $1 million, and it's not enough. And so we do this deal where I just say, Sid, I'm betting right now that they haven't told you where their driver is, have they? And I'm betting this and I'm betting that. And I just kind of goad him. And he's such a pro. He just sits there and says, you don't know what I know. I'm not saying anything about that. Of course, he's not letting anything on to me. So after a couple minutes of that, he leaves the room, and we wait about 3 or 4 minutes, and then Pip gets up and goes outside, and Sid's down the hall a little bit, and there he is. Jim goes up to this railing, and they're looking out into space in this atrium, just staring straight ahead. And Sid says, they effing lied to me. And the case settled in the next hour or so for an exponentially better number. That was unusual. That didn't happen much.
What a story.
Yeah. If you're old enough and hang around long enough, you get a lot of stories.
Yeah. That's a great one. Well, any other?
As I remember too, the rates were good back then, and you did an incredible job with annuities that to this day pay our young ladies, pay her and allow her to be taken care of and live very, very well. And they will pay her till the day she dies.
Yeah, that was an interesting case for us too, because we, that was one of the times where we melded higher yielding annuities with treasury securities. And a lot of her settlement, I think half of it went into a treasury funded structure for the ultimate in safety and security for her. So that was something unusual that we're proud to be involved in. So
that's it changed her life.
Yeah,
changed every aspect of it.
That ability. The purpose of the podcast, as I said at the beginning, is to really give injury victims a read on real trial lawyers that try cases, because as I've said, that's what generates settlement pros. The best attorneys at getting the best settlements are the attorneys that try cases, win or lose. So and you've made a couple of comments in that regard today, prior to, during the interview. What do you see currently in terms of trial lawyers and skills? And you've been doing this, you said, for, well, I guess it's been what, 40 years, and you're mediating for close to 15, the last 15. So you've seen a lot of practitioners. First off, I assume you agree with my assessment that lawyers that don't go in the courtroom don't get.
I can tell you that after the defense's evaluation of the plaintiff, the most important thing to them is who's the lawyer who has the case. And the money they pay, it's risk and reward. They know who's going to go to trial. They know who can afford to fund a big, expensive case. They know who can get results. Those people's clients get paid better than the people represented by attorneys who are, for whom the most important moment is when they sign the case.
Mm.
You know, it's they pay based on the risk. I mean, insurance companies are smart. I mean, this is what they do for a living.
That's an interesting point that you just made. That for those type of attorneys, they think they've won when they sign the case up. Just landing the case is the win.
Yeah, here's the analogy I make, and this isn't exactly on point, but when they dropped the bar on advertising and allowed advertising, let me say, first of all, most of the people coming out of law school now are way smarter than I ever was. I mean, I couldn't have got into law school probably with my grades that these people carry. So let's start with that. And number two, the disadvantage that the newer lawyers have is that they don't get enough trials. Too many cases get resolved, too many cases get mediated and settled, not enough get tried. There's a lot of pressure to get rid of cases. And so they're getting less opportunity to try cases. That isn't good for our society as a whole. We need a species in our culture, in our society, who knows how to advocate, whether it's politically, legislatively, in a courtroom, whatever. Our society needs advocates, and we need people trained in advocacy. And we are losing that skill a little bit generation by generation. But back to the real point, when they allowed advertising, the most important thing became signing the case, not delivering on it. Everybody's competing. You know, they're buying police records and sending solicitation letters. They're all over the media, which I feel kind of diminishes the public's view of what we do and who we are. For the record, I've never advertised. I don't even have a website, Jack.
Yeah, I know you don't.
So so that's probably not smart, but I don't want one. I don't need one. So it became so important to sign the cases. And what I liken it to is, in order to get them signed, lawyers tend to overpromise what they can deliver. My generation believed in the philosophy of underpromise and overdeliver. And at the end of the day, you know, money's never adequate for these serious injuries. But at the end of the day, rather than being disappointed, they understand it and they accept it, and they leave happier than when they've been overpromised but then underdelivered. And I've mediated cases where plaintiffs' lawyers, young lawyers, being too aggressive. I had two inside of a month where they made $4 million demands. And one case settled for $300,000 and one settled for $350,000. They were both good value for the cases. The problem was they had created this anchoring expectation with their clients with the demand. So instead of being happy with that result, they were confused and unhappy about it. And so you have an unhappy client at the end of the day, instead of one that should be happy because they got a good result. That part of it is unfortunate. It's experience. Those lawyers will get more experience and do it better, but I see it more than I'd like to.
Yeah, you know, I think that may be an offshoot, like we were discussing of advertising and the advent of websites and attorneys able to put up websites, and essentially that's a billboard.
You can
Just
say
as
anything
much
you
of an
want in
ad,
it.
right?
You say anything you want.
Yeah, you can say anything you want.
You can't blame the consuming public for believing what they're told because they have no way to verify how accurate it is.
So, an analogy I thought of is it's somewhat analogous to realtors in a way,
You bet.
because for many
How,
realtors, it's all about getting the listing.
how much can you get for my house?
And
The world.
yeah, we're going to get the world. And then, of course, the real work is on the sales side. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, some
Analogy
attorneys,
is
I think
taken.
the age of advertising and websites has probably created that situation where those attorneys are really competing on the basis of, I can get you more, I can get you more, I can get you more. We can get you the best. We can get you more than they can. What did they tell you? Oh, we can do better than that. And then creates this false expectation. And if the result is even fair, but it's way below what the claimant thought they were asking for, which, let's face it, when claimants see the complaint with the big number in it, the prayer, or a demand letter with a big number in it, they think that's what they're going to get. In a lot of these cases that I've been involved in, no one told them that, hey, this is a number we're putting out there and it starts the negotiation. It's not going to be the number that we get.
Even when they're told that, Jack,
Yeah, they may not remember.
The nature of anchoring, which every good trial lawyer should understand, but the nature of anchoring is, even if you explain it that way, people, humans, through no fault of their own, still get anchored. They've still seen the number in print. There's still been expectations created which are not realistic. You really need to manage client expectations from the get-go. I tell every single client I sign, and I have for decades, that there will never be a day that you walk out of my office happy with you the rest of your life. And by its nature, money is going to come and go. This is not going to be fair. It's not going to be adequate. It's not going to feel right. Know it now. And if that isn't comfortable for you, there's a lot of lawyers out there that will tell you they will make you rich. And you need to be comfortable with your lawyer. So if you're not comfortable with that and what I'm telling you, you really need to go to talk to more lawyers before you make a decision. And I started from
advice.
the first meeting.
Yeah, that's good advice. So pre-COVID and then post-COVID, pre-COVID, we've been talking about cases and results and attitudes and some of those things. And I kind of look at this as PC or BC and AC, before COVID and after COVID. One of the things that's happened during the the COVID pandemic is courts went basically dark, and essentially everybody went home and everybody's phoning it in, so to speak. The civil justice docket, where personal injury cases work their way through, has been shut down, and while the courts said that they needed to maintain access for criminal cases because of the right under the Constitution for a speedy trial, right?
Right.
So we've discussed this. We were talking about this the other day, and I wanted to get into it a little bit deeper with you, but it seems like there's kind of a belief or a meme maybe that's floating around within the trial bar, that because things are a little slow with the courts and it may be a while before you can get in for a trial, that maybe defendants it may not be worth it to negotiate or try to settle a case at this point, because defendants might be looking to lowball because they'd see you as needy, and you wouldn't have the leverage as a trial lawyer of the threat of the jury trial hanging over them.
Yep. All of that is true, and all of it is true in general, just taking as premises. Do insurance companies use economic need as a leverage to settle cases for less money? Sure they do. You know, if the plaintiff is in dire need and some money now is better than more money later, do they use that to pay less money? Yeah. Their job description is to buy the case for the lowest dollar possible. Don't blame them for it. Just understand it. Understand the other room. So does that happen? I am certain that it happens. I do hear from people that without the threat of a trial in the next year or two, and talking about Zoom trials and things like that, a lot of people believe the companies are not coming in good faith and trying to get cases resolved. I will just say in my mediator niche, I'm not seeing that so much.
Really?
I think that the companies, to my experience, have been paying comparable money for comparable cases. They need to move cases too. They don't want a massive backlog in 2 years. Defense lawyers need to work. Adjusters need to work.
Oh, yeah.
Companies need to process. Insurance companies are making a bundle right now. There's so much less driving. There's far fewer accidents. Most of them are still charging full premiums.
Yeah.
They're making bundles. So they don't mind spending some of it to kind of keep the docks cleared a little bit. So
I suppose
my
if
experience
adjusters,
has been a little different. But
if adjusters aren't adjusting claims to closure, then their risk is that they could get laid off.
That's right.
And if defense counsel is not working a case, they're not billing. And if they're not billing, they're not making any money. So really the incentive maybe is the other way.
Nobody's benefited by such a backlog of cases in a couple of years that nobody can get cases out. I mean, Oregon's always had trial within a year of filing, except for real circumstances. We don't want the big city horrors we hear about where it's 5 years to trial. Nobody wants that.
Right.
So do the companies use economic leverage to settle cases for less money? Yeah. Are they still looking to settle cases, and is it dramatically affecting numbers? Not that I've seen.
Interesting.
Maybe just my experience, though. I don't know.
So during COVID, instead of in-face or in-person mediations, they have all gone online to either Zoom or Microsoft Teams.
Yep.
How's that worked out?
I find it interesting. I'm doing them mostly, I'm in my office now, but I'm doing most of them from home. I find that they're actually as or more efficient to be done by Zoom, where I can jump right back and forth. There's less of the BS time. You know, you're talking with old friends and you're doing this and that. And, you know, you basically go to work. Everybody's there for one purpose. I find Zoom, I use somebody to run it for me so I'm not distracted, but I find it efficient and effective. Is it as good as being in person? No. Will that always be better? Yes. It'll be better for mediations, and it'll be dramatically better to have trials in person than Zoom trials.
Well, let's talk about that. You've had mediation, so you've seen Zoom and what we'd call distanced mediations from the mediator standpoint. But what about the plaintiff's standpoint? Have you participated in one from that side of the table, and what were the pros or cons?
You know, the con, there's more of a con. You want to be in the room with your client. You want to be able to talk to them about what an offer really means. You want to make the comparison for them. X number of dollars here, you have to, you know, the offer on your case is $600,000. In order to do better than that, to do that well at trial, you've got to get $710,000. The costs go up to try the case, the fees go up. So make sure that you understand when you reject or take that offer, what you have to do better, and whether it makes sense, because the point is not how much fee can you generate. That's the last consideration. The point is, when do you achieve the maximum recovery for your client that you are ethically required to try and get in the safest possible way? And all of your advice is driven by that. Every word of advice, every breath. So Zoom, but Zoom mediations are working well. They're fine, and they've worked well.
So how about depositions? What's it been like doing a Zoom deposition instead of having that expert sitting in front of you and you can see them twitch, you can see their body language, you can see the sweat form on their upper lip.
Bet. All of that's important. The in-person body evaluation. That's why trials need to be in person, because you're evaluating witnesses. Depositions are a little messy, but the truth is they're better every day. People who are good on the computer can bring up documents, have documents marked, have them read by everybody. The people who are more skilled at it, and it is becoming a real skill, are doing just fine. Although you do always miss in-person interaction and evaluation.
Sure. So we're 7-8 months into this COVID pandemic. We haven't civil cases have got to get going at some point. I would assume there's probably a backlog now.
Yeah.
Is there talk of trying cases by Zoom? And
it's being
let's
done.
talk about that situation. What does that look like?
I'm a member of the Inner Circle of Advocates, and that's got 100 lawyers across the country, and they're just exceptional people and lawyers. A number of them have conducted Zoom trials, very interestingly, to very good results. Very good results.
Really?
Yeah, and everybody's apprehensive about them. The results have been good. What we have to be careful of, though, as a society, is not getting lazy with this and thinking it's less expensive and it's easier. And when we come out of COVID, trying to continue to conduct Zoom trials. They are not as good. You need to be able to evaluate. The most important one thing in a trial is the juror's evaluation of credibility, whether it's the witness, the attorneys, whoever it is in that courtroom. In my mind, it is critical that when it is possible, when we're out of this, we get back to doing all of our trials in person so that those evaluations can be made without hiding behind a screen. It is the one most important thing juries do. They decide who's telling the truth. And anyone would tell you it's easier to do when you're in the room with somebody than looking at them on a screen where they've been practiced and prompted and presented in such a way.
Yeah, I suppose there's a whole cottage industry that's sprung up to counsel and consult with expert witnesses on how to build your backdrop and the angle of the camera and the mics and probably giving them all the best advice on how to build their credibility.
And well, they do that with witnesses for real trials. It's just another layer of a manufactured response as opposed to necessarily the honest response. We don't need it.
Yeah, when you're in an interpersonal type of a situation, if you're trying to make a judgment about somebody's integrity through a screen, you're missing some really important inputs. And there's a vibration. There's you can't get that through a screen. There's body language, and then all of these individual ticks and tells that you might miss out on. You wouldn't see somebody tapping their foot 100 miles an hour underneath a table on a screen, but you could probably hear it.
Well, beyond that, Jack, you're talking about jurors who are in their own homes. You know, you're talking about people's attention and honesty to the process. And you're accountable if you're in a courtroom under a judge's gaze. You're paying attention. You know, you can easily pretend to pay attention on a screen while you're doing your crossword.
Oh man,
I mean, it's a nightmare in
that's
my
a scary
mind.
thought. So it sounds like a couple of your peers or associates have had Zoom trials and had really good success, but am I picking up that already there's some thought out there that that's not the norm, that
I don't
see for
think
the future?
I don't think any true trial lawyer thinks that it's a good thing. I think that the real trial lawyers think it's a necessary thing right now for cases that have to get processed. And they're figuring out ways also to conduct. I mean, some of these good results have been conducted with social distancing, masks, and plastic. And they take the whole courtroom and spread the jury out in the courtroom so they're distanced. You limit spectators so you don't have spectators. The lawyers wear masks all the time. You know, the witnesses, some judges make them take the mask off, some have them wear it, but everything's distanced. You know, they're COVID trials. So they're different. They're not as good. They're not as intimate. You're not as close, but it's still better than Zoom.
Still better than the screen, huh?
You bet.
Wow. Well, don't know when we're going to see
Well, if you
the
knew that,
announcement.
if you knew
Yeah,
that,
but I know that we're seeing certain signs of it in, out there. And I saw something this morning about our local school district board has gone to the governor and asked for, essentially some hard guidelines on when they can open up and get kids back into school here in the Lake Oswego and Westland school district. So it sounds like reasoned thought, and we've got to find a way back to some semblance of normalcy.
no,
So
it's all about balance. It's about balance and
about
safety.
balance. So
Yeah.
safety and getting it open. So we'll hope for that.
And not having knee-jerk political reactions, but well thought through scientific responses that allow us to get past this pandemic and still maintain our social structure and keep people employed and keep food on their tables.
Yes, we need some balance. So, well, what else?
I think you
We've,
probably delved as deep as there is.
Yeah, we've gone down a couple of interesting paths here. We've talked about the main focus of this podcast and the fact that real trial attorneys try cases, and that's the whole aim here, is to let the listeners know and understand that the biggest thing when you're evaluating an attorney is, do they go in the courtroom? Do they try cases? Have they tried cases?
You know what?
It's not the one loss record. It's the fact that they go in the arena.
That's right. Any trial lawyer who tells you they've never lost in the courtroom is not a real trial lawyer, because they haven't taken tough cases and gone and tried them, because we don't win them all.
Yeah.
Period.
No one has.
And we shouldn't. What you've just suggested is really good. If there's consumers out there that happen to see this, when you meet with a lawyer, ask them those questions. Ask them how long they've been litigating, what types of cases they've tried, how many they've tried. Get a sense of what access to a courtroom that person has had, and you will then have a leg up on how the other side is going to evaluate your case. Because a major part of their evaluation is who's representing you. So consumers should ask those questions. And if a lawyer doesn't want to talk to you about it, you don't want them.
Yeah. Yep. Should ask them, do you try cases? How many have you tried? When was the last one you tried? Tell me about your worst loss, your best success? Those are all valid questions. And as I've said to many friends and relatives over the years, when they've asked me, well, if I need an attorney, how do I find one besides calling you? That's been my advice.
Yeah.
You want to question their track record in terms of cases going to trial, and that's the most important thing.
I just like when you're asking for medical advice, you got to be your own advocate. And if you're not capable of being your own advocate because of the injury or anything else, have somebody with you trust who is willing to step into that role. In your medical care, you should do that. When you're seeking legal help, you should do it. No question.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up here, but I want to ask you kind of three different questions as we wrap up. What are you most appreciative of in your life right now?
That one's pretty easy. I've got 3 grandkids. I'm 70 years old, and I've got 3 grandkids that are my world. One of them is living with me, which is something I never thought I'd be given that gift. It is the greatest gift possible. And I'm being held up from COVID by seeing the other 2, and it's killing me. I am very appreciative of the opportunity that the law has given me, because what we get to do is help people, and there's a tremendous sense of satisfaction that comes from that. So with regard to the law, that's my greatest thanks. But with regard to most thankful right now, it's trite and everybody's heard it 1,000 times, but it's having my grandkids.
Yeah, that's great. I feel the same way.
I knew you knew.
Yeah. We had that 6-year-old living with us for the last 6-7 months, and her and her mom finally found a new spot, and they've moved out, and we're missing them. But
house went quiet, didn't it?
Yeah, it got really quiet. It went really loud when they moved in, and then it went totally quiet when they moved out, and it's both were hard to get used to. So if your career was to be condensed down into one sentence when it's all over, what would that one sentence say about you? What would be your I don't want to jinx you, but what would your extended epitaph be?
Thanks. That's a great question. You said career, so it's about the law. I would hope that it would be he did things the right way for the right reasons.
Oh, that's a great one. He did things the right way for the right reason. That's excellent. Well, Mark, my friend, this has been great. I definitely in my career consider you and your partner and brother-in-law, Jim Pippin, 2 of the top settlement pros that I've had the pleasure to meet and work with. And congrats on making it through the podcast with me. Thanks for taking the time. You're a true settlement pro, and thanks for being a tough fighter for the rights of injury victims.
I appreciate
it. Thank you very, very much. And I hope I hope you don't. I know you've been talking about retirement, and you think you may have taken your last case. I hope that isn't the case. I hope something comes along and catches your interest.
I got to tell you, but I just agreed 2 days ago with Keith to be his wingman and go try a med mal case down on the coast.
Oh man. Well, that's great. Good. You're staying around. I like it.
It's harder to stop than it should be.
I like it. So you're referencing Keith Dozier, who we've also done a podcast on, another top trial lawyer. And in these first podcasts, I'm reaching out to, mainly my local boys, so to speak, to talk to you trial lawyers that I've seen in this area and state first. And then I'm branching out to some of the lawyers that I've either met or I know of around the country. So we'll be adding those to the fold here. We'll curate some more lawyers around the country for plaintiffs in different states and with different types of cases. But thanks again for the time and the insights into you, and really appreciate it. Really appreciate it, man.
Jack, I appreciate it too. And thanks for everything you've done for all my clients over all these years. They are still taken care of because of the help you've given them. So I appreciate it.
It's been our pleasure. It's been our pleasure. Thank you. That's it for today. This has been Jack Meligan. See you all, everybody. Bye-bye.